This is Hannibal and Piper here from the HannibalTV.com showing off her new alien neckerchief. And this is the Great North Wrestling Podcast. It's not my podcast. It's the new executive vice president of Great North Wrestling, Jack Kilby's podcast every Sunday night at 8. And today he has none other than Great North Wrestling president Michael Andrews as his guest. So I'm going to let them jump into it, but I am going to say he is going to have a special podcast Thursday with none other than Ted Hart. And Ted is going to auction off this outfit live here on the Hannibal TV. So there you go. It's going to be your first opportunity live to get an outfit, but I'll let you guys get to the podcast, and there will be some fan questions in this for fans who want to say anything.
Thank you, Hannibal, and thank you, Michael, for coming on the Great North Wrestling Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I hope it's the first of quite a few.
Yes, sir. As you're aware, we're in the process of restarting Great North Wrestling after a brief hiatus and the COVID situation that effectively killed a lot of live events in Ontario and in Canada generally. And I thought it would be beneficial for the fans to have a working knowledge of the history of Great North Wrestling, and there's no one better than you to provide that. But before we get into some of the details, I'm wondering if you could give us a brief synopsis of your background in athletics and business.
All right. Well, sure. Well, first off, I'm from Hamilton, Ontario. The sports I played growing up, just played recreational house league hockey, some baseball. I did some track back in the day until I quit that to focus on baseball. Was on a couple of provincial championship teams. Never a star, but I was on some pretty good teams then. But I always enjoyed this, and I always enjoyed sports. I always enjoyed the spirit of competition, of pushing the limits of human excellence and seeing how far we could go. I was more into team sports than individual sports. So my goal was to get into sports administration. So I actually I started out at Mohawk College in Hamilton. My mother was a custodian there, so we got a discount on tuition back then. From there, I actually was able to transfer to McMaster University, taking a business administration as well. And then I went to Syracuse University, where I got my MBA later. So my first actual job in professional sports, I actually worked for the Hamilton Canucks. I was a account. They called it an account executive. So what that meant was I would sit on the phones all summer trying to sell season ticket packages, and I was paid commission. And that summer, I sold 2 season ticket packages. Very, 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 very proud of that. But yeah, there were some people there, the president, the vice president, they could get on the phone and they could sell, 5 or 6 season ticket packages in half an hour. But, you learn by failure, I think, I got to focus on the positive there. So when the Hamilton Canucks moved to Syracuse, that's when I actually moved to Syracuse as well, to go to the university there. When I graduated, I worked for the Waco Wizards of the Western Professional Hockey League. I was in the communications department down in Waco, Texas. I wasn't there very long. I actually interviewed with the hometown Hamilton Bulldogs when they moved from Cape Breton in 1996. I didn't get the job. Somebody else who worked for the London Knights got that job. They started in September and they were fired in December. So I didn't feel too good about that, but I didn't go back down because I thought I was going to get the Bulldogs job, and I just decided to stick around town. I ended up working some odd jobs around there. Got involved a little bit with the Renegade Wrestling Alliance in Burlington and Hamilton. They were trying to build their brand by putting on a lot of free events, like in parking lots and shopping malls and things like that. I ended up working for the Albany Firebirds of the Arena Football League. Again, I was in the communications, marketing type person. I did up the news releases, did a lot of game day stuff, with promotions and events. And then I got an opportunity to work for the Ottawa Lynx in 2007, midway through the year. And they moved to Allentown, Pennsylvania at the end of the season. And I ended up staying in Ottawa. And that's where I ended up meeting up with Hannibal.
So that dovetails nicely into my next question, which was your first role with Great North Wrestling, and how did that come about? Given obviously you have quite a diverse and well qualified background, but just how you first got involved with GNW.
Okay, yeah. Well, I ended up, because again my job ended. You had to take a job, you got to eat. So I ended up working for a security company. They made me a supervisor right away. And Hannibal was one of the guards. And I used to go out in the middle of the night, and he was working at a construction site in the west end of Ottawa, and I would go and I'd meet with him, and I knew he was a pro wrestler, and I had time to kill, and we started talking, and then he'd tell me about his ideas for his promotion, and I'd tell him some of my ideas from my sports background. I always wanted to get back into sports administration, and what ended up happening was I did go to a couple of shows he promoted before I ended up getting involved. He promoted actually a TNA show at the Garetan Arena in Hull over the holidays of 2007, 2008. And right before I got involved with him full time, I went to a show he promoted in Hawkesbury, Ontario. And on that show, I remember there was Abdul the Butcher, Rennie Dupree, Pierre Carwillette, Lanny Poffel. And that show, it drew so well that he went back there 2 months later, and that's when I was involved. So my first role was I drove Bushwhacker Luke and Honky Tonk Man around for that show, and I also got a sponsor to sponsor the next show. Actually, he flew them in for two shows. One of them was at the arena in the Gloucester Arena in Ottawa, and the next night we were in Hawkesbury again, and I got a sponsor for the show in Ottawa. Now, the funny thing was, it was a Lebanese restaurant, and as part of the deal, I actually gave them the rights to sell the concessions on the floor. When I was on my way to the arena, the guy called me, and he says, "Hey, they're not letting us into the arena." So I said, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "Well, the people who have the concession stand actually in the front of the arena, they're not letting this guy in." So I said, "No, we have the floor. We rent the floor." Like, we didn't even tell them that they were going to be, like, nothing happened in that arena in the summertime at all. So we didn't expect there to be somebody setting up, in the front canteen. But they ended up, selling pizzas in the front, and the Lebanese guy had sold some sandwiches on the floor, but he didn't sell as much as he would have had that concession stand in the front not been open. So that was a bit of a learning experience right there.
So you, from there, and we'll talk about some of the talent that you provided transportation for in a minute, but you segued into a more marketing and communications end of the business. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So the way that I look at things is the traditional way of promoting professional wrestling events would be to have somebody on the ground or go visit the town a few weeks ahead of time, and just put up posters everywhere, right? So we still do that, but what we really have to do, 15 years ago, the thing was to find marketing partnerships. So we partner with a radio station, partner with a TV station, partner with a newspaper. A lot of these places that we go to, we found that when we're in the city, we're competing with a lot of other types of entertainment and other types of sports, and it's a bit expensive. Some of our lesser drawing events have actually been held in the more expensive venues. So our strategy was to go out into some of the surrounding areas, and where we would basically be the biggest names in town. We'd be the biggest event to happen there all year, besides like their local fall fair or their local dairy fest or whatever. So that's why we went all over Eastern Ontario. We We send out press releases to all the media venues, and we get a lot of the talent on the air. Sometimes we've run some radio ads. Sometimes they get on for free. I mean, they like to have, wrestlers are very interesting people, as you well know. So radio stations would love to have them. So if we can get them on before the show, especially just to let the crowd know that, okay, they're in town. Okay. This isn't just a bunch of hooey going on. Like we're actually on the floor, in your town, and we're going to put on an event, and you're going to remember us.
And that's unfortunately with our last event being canceled due to issues beyond our control. That's the one feedback that we got from the folks in Petawawa was how wrestling still, even in 2022, can bring the community together and can be a very positive for the community overall. So I appreciate the amount of effort that it takes to create that goodwill, grassroots in the communities, which sounds like is an integral piece of any independent promotion. But I wanted to circle back to, you had discussed driving some of the talent, transporting them to and fro, and you mentioned Bushwhacker Luke and was it Honky? Do you have any other notable personalities or anecdotes that you can share in this forum?
Yeah, sure. I probably don't have a comprehensive list because I've had so many of them over the years that some of them might have slipped my mind. But I remember the first time, Honky Tonk Man and Bushwhacker Luke, also Brutus Beefcake, Sonny, Tammy Sitch, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. I've had him a few times. Jinder Mahal a couple of times. We did Sheldon Benjamin in between WWE stints. Lanny Poffo. Greg the Hammer Valentine a couple times, Johnny Devine, Brian Knobs, Rennie Dupree, just to name a few. Actually, that first time that I actually took Honky and Luke, my instruction was to drive them around Ottawa and just get seen, okay? Because Hannibal actually said, okay, we're going to rent a pink Cadillac and we're going to drive Honky Tonk Man around downtown Ottawa in it to promote the show, but we couldn't find a pink Cadillac anywhere. So I actually drove them around to a few different restaurants, and they sit down and drink, get seen. There was one place we went in the Ottawa market, and we sat and we had a few drinks, and then after we had about 4 or 5 drinks, then the bartender says, "Oh, I recognize you guys," and then started giving them free drinks. And Honky Tonk Man says, "Why didn't you give us free drinks an hour ago? We wasted a bunch of money." The funny thing, we walked up the street to another place. It was the Pier 21. It's now closed. It's a East Coast themed park, or East Coast themed bar in Ottawa, and there was a fight on the sidewalk. There was a guy, and he was on top of a guy, and he was pounding him like that. And then Luke runs up and he says, "Oh, boys, we got ourselves a match on right now." And then the guy looks up and he's like, he's punching the guy still, and he looks up and he's like, then a big smile on his face, he says, "Hey, it's the Honky Tonk Man and a Bushwhacker." He's like, "You guys are my favorite wrestlers." Then he walks away from the guy he was pounding on and comes up and talks. And it was like, yeah, that was quite the way to diffuse a situation. But with a lot of these folks, there's a lot of surreal things that happen around them, as I'm sure you're well aware. There was an incident. I'm not going to say who it was, but I was picking up a wrestler he was flying in to Presque Isle, Maine for some shows we did in New Brunswick. And when we were at the border, he had a pill bottle that was unlabeled, full of different types of pills. So he didn't have the prescription on the bottle. Like when you cross the border, if you have a prescription drug, you're supposed to have the label on it with the doctor and what it is. So we were at the border for 3.5 hours while they were on the phone trying to call all these pharmacies and doctors, like in California and Florida and Massachusetts, to figure out, okay, this is what the pill is. Does he have a prescription for it? Blah, blah, blah. And here, I'm thinking like, you idiot. Like if I get my car repossessed, or if they take my car away and we don't make it across the border, like I'm going to, No, I didn't know. I didn't know what to do. But anyway, like they could account for everything except 3 pills that he didn't have a prescription for. And he said that somebody at his gym gave them to him. So they took those pills, disposed of them, gave him everything else, and we went on our way. And one of the girls that was working there, that was giving us the gears for 3.5 hours, she came out just as we were getting ready to go and says, "Oh, could you sign a picture for my brother, please?" After all that.
Well, just to follow up on that line of questioning, everyone is aware of the trials and tribulations of Tamara Sonny Sitch. I'm just wondering if you had any commentary on how she was to deal with, a true diva in the sense or otherwise, and who you would, if you had to pick, who was the most difficult to work with in that capacity out of the talents that you provided services for.
Okay. Yeah, that's easy. Starting with Tammy, I drove her around for a couple of days. I didn't have an issue with her at all. She was nice. She was cordial. I do know that she did want her privacy, which was to be respected. I drove her to a liquor store. She got a 6-pack of coolers, and she says, "Okay, yep, this will last me the weekend." She was great at the show. There was a wrestler. We actually did a kickboxing exhibition at the show, and one of the guys got a cut over his eye, and she helped him out. She says, "Oh, no, I used to help out with the wrestling team in high school. I know how to patch these things up," and she helped him out. She was fine with me, although I did hear that she was on the way to another show in the Toronto area, and I didn't go with them, but the driver said that she requested to stop twice for meals on the way to Toronto. So a 4-hour drive, and she had to stop twice and for pizza both times. But again, I can't speak to that. I wasn't there, but that's what I heard. It's too bad that she's going what she's going through, but I had no indication that it would have come to that. The most difficult that I've ever dealt with, and it's still fresh in my mind. I still have the receipts for it. Brian Knobs. I drove him around one weekend because he did a comedy show in Ottawa 3 years ago. And when I picked him up at the airport, I said, "Okay, hi, I'm blah, blah, blah. Welcome to Ottawa." And first thing he wanted to go to the first liquor store. And he was mad because they didn't have, there was something he was looking for. He said, I don't think it's available in Canada, but anyway, he settled on some Fireball. And he was just he was living his gimmick. I think he was already intoxicated when he got off the plane. And he was just, he was kind of like an unfunny Don Rickles type insult comment to everywhere he went. Like, he was just insulting everybody. He was insulting me. He was insulting my driving. If it wasn't for the show the next night, I probably would have just dropped him off on the side of the road and said, "Okay, here you go." One thing I did notice is that he did have some health problems. Like, he could barely walk. Like, my normal walk, even if I slowed down a bit, he couldn't keep up. I did keep him up a bit later because Hannibal wanted me to bring him to a couple of places, and he said, no, I don't want to go. Why are you doing this? Is this guy like your brother-in-law or something like that? I just want to go back to my hotel. And I'm like, no, you made me uncomfortable. I'm gonna squeeze a little bit of juice out of you right now. So yeah, I drove him around Ottawa and Hull, and yeah, he was just generally drunk, disrespectful to everybody, including myself. And I wasn't going to be looking after him the next day, but I told the guy, I said, just watch out. But apparently he woke up and he was fine the next day. He put on a great show at the comedy club, and yeah, that's what it was for. But there was that was the most trying night ever. Like, he would say stuff, and I would be like, okay, well, you know what, that's good. Maybe you should use it on the show. And he says, no, I'm using it on you right now. And it was
truly nasty, as
that's what he kept saying. What do you expect? I'm the nasty boy. It's like, buddy, you can turn it off around me. Like, I'm smart, like, to the business. Yeah. But anyway,
living the gimmick, as you said. Any memories of dealing with former Great North Wrestling mainstay Brutus Beefcake?
Brutus Beefcake. Well, when I was younger, he was actually one of my favorites. Now looking back on it, I don't really know why, but yeah, he was an interesting fellow. He's a nice fellow, but he's one of those guys where he was really on top in the 80s and 90s. Like he was probably a millionaire a few times over. Okay. We went to a show at Smiths Falls. I'd say it was about 6-7 years ago. And he wasn't doing too financially well, I think, because he was telling me, he says, okay, I got all these pictures. He says, how much should I sell them for? And I said, well, how much do you normally sell them for? And he says, well, I was in West Virginia last week and I was selling for $5 a piece. And he said, well, I said, well, Honky Tonk Man was here last year and he was selling for $20 a piece and he sold out. And he was like, $20, wow. And he called up his girlfriend who was in Florida. And he says, listen, I'm in Ontario. I can sell pictures for $20. Can you imagine $20 a picture? And he was just so excited to get those $20 a picture. But like, he was one of the top guys in the business 25, 30 years ago. And there was another time too where I wasn't there, but somebody else told me he only wanted me to drive him around. And he was driving around on some dark side road in New Brunswick in the woods. And I had told him on the way back on the way to the show the night before, I said, you got to really be careful around here because these rural roads, you got to watch out for critters on the side of the road, like raccoons and deer and things like that. Like I learned how to drive in the dark. You watch out for their eyes in the ditch. Right. And he became paranoid if he was driving with anyone but me. He said, oh, you got to watch out for the deer. You got to watch out for the deer. I wish he was here. And that sort of thing. But he could be really, he gets really uptight about minute things, but it took him a while to calm down. Once he was calm, he started enjoying himself. And it was great. But he still adheres to that Hollywood type lifestyle, even though, he's not there anymore. I hope he's enjoying his retirement right now.
Absolutely. And one of the frequent appearees on the Hannibal TV is the Honky Tonk Man, Wayne Ferris, numerous shoot interviews, numerous events. And I'm just wondering if you have any notable interactions with Wayne. Yeah,
lots. Well, I don't know. Maybe Hannibal can come on sometime and tell the story about the time he got screeched in. That was that'd be pretty good. But I'll let him tell that story sometime. Let's see. There's one thing in particular where I noticed. Again, we were in Smiths Falls. Like Smiths Falls is one of our top towns. Like Smiths Falls, Hawkesbury, Pembroke, Petawawa. We were there and at a show, and the arena was sort of attached to a community hall, like a Legion. And anyway, it was during the show, and Honky Tonk Man, he just wanted to get away from everything. He didn't want to hang out in the back of the locker room. He kind of likes having his own room, like his own hotel room, his own dressing room, because he just he just wants to do his thing without the marks coming up to him. And we went over to the Legion part, and he sat down, he had a beer, and then one of the older fellows come over and spoke to him. And, just talking about, how it's hard to keep up with the young guys. But the thing was that the guy, he was trying to quit drinking. And Honky says, you know what? He says, yeah, I've tried a couple times too. He says, it's hard, but he says, I've managed to slow it down because it's a really tough thing. And, he says, I wish you best luck. If you can quit, do it. But, if you can't, there's always somebody out there to help you. So like Honky was giving this guy advice on how to quit drinking. I thought that was one of those human moments there that you don't really see, when the camera's on.
Absolutely. And you said, you just referenced some of the great towns that the territory has run over the years. And I'm just wondering if any memorable events or cards come out in the forefront of your mind that the viewers would be interested in hearing about, because there is a rich history of this promotion.
Yeah. Okay. One thing I can tell you, we did run Napanee, Ontario quite a bit, but I think now they keep the ice in their arena all year round, which makes it kind of hard to run shows. I remember there was one show in particular where I was working my office job, my office on a contract in Ottawa here, and I'm on my way. I have my office, my suit and tie on, and Hannibal calls me up and he says, "You on your way?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "What? Go to Walmart and buy as many pop and chips as you can." I'm like, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." He says, "It's steaming hot in here, and they're not running concessions, and the pop machine's broken." I'm like, "Okay, no problem." There actually happened to be a Walmart in the same parking lot as the arena, so I went in with a couple of carts, and I got his, pop chips, all kinds of, the value packs, whatever. And he says, "Okay, now all we need is pizza." And there's happened to be a pizza place not too far almost in the same parking lot. Call them up. "Okay, send us over a dozen pepperoni pizzas." I think we ordered pepperoni pizzas like 2 or 3 times. So I ended up running the concessions myself. While I'm dressed in a suit and tie. I'm handling out. Let's say we're going to $5 a slice, can, and a bag of chips. $5. Bam! All night. And somebody come up to me and says, "You know what? You look like you're in the wrong spot, because the guy they have as the ring announcer, he's dressed as a slob, and you're serving pizza, and you're dressed to kill." I'm like, "Well, that's the business." And actually, we did quite well with the concessions that night. Actually, another thing that happened. There's one in Cornwall, Ontario. We did a old motel called Murphy's Inn. Hacksaw Jim Duggan was there, and it's right before we were supposed to go on. He's like, "Oh, I need a 2x4. I'm like, You didn't bring a 2x4. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? Because we could go to a lumber yard and get something." And no. So I'm going with the owner of the motel. We're actually in the basement, and we're looking around on the framing, looking for a 2x4 to we could pull off the wall and give it to Hacksaw so we can carry it out. And we ended up taking a 2x3 off of an old set of stairs in the basement. And it's like, "Okay, I'll pull the nails out of it." It's like, "Okay, here, Jim, this is the best we can do. Pretend it's a 2x4. I said, "Okay, thanks, guys." So yeah, we ended up getting through that. Okay, here's the best story I can tell you. Happened in Cornwall as well. I'm not going to mention the names, but we had a couple of wrestlers. One of them became a real big name. We were at a place called Fatty Cats in Cornwall after the show. They helped sell some tickets, and all the wrestlers went there. And they met up with a couple of local women. They were slightly older women, but they were interested nonetheless. And anyway, they went back to their motel in Ottawa, and these girls called them. They wanted to come over, so they drove from Cornwall to Ottawa, spent the night in their motel. Now, the person who told me this was actually one of the referees, because he slept in the bathroom of their motel room. So he told me that one of the women got up, came in the bathroom, and made a comment about the little guy in the bathroom there. And then what happened next was one of the women got a call on her cell phone that she had a house fire the night before. So they had to leave. They left Ottawa. They left the guys in the motel room, and they went back to Cornwall. So I actually looked it up in the news because I couldn't believe the story. Right? It's like, oh, come on. Sure enough, there was a house fire in the very community where she lived. Her house, her husband died in the fire while she and her friend were with these 2 wrestlers that night.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Not good. In 2016, you assumed the role of Great North Wrestling president, and just wanted to ask you how that came to be, and any of your memorable functions in that role.
Well, yeah, that was we actually had a commissioner for a few years before that, Commissioner John Maloney, who was a Smiths Falls city councilor. He stepped back a little bit in his role. I mean, his role was mainly more of a figurehead, more of an authority figure. I was more of a nuts and bolts guy doing things behind the scenes. So the most memorable things I can think of is again just administering the disciplinary measures. we have some wrestlers sometimes that cross the line in the ring. It's really tough when you have a championship match, and somebody's got to be there to make sure everything's kosher. We like clean wins. Okay. I mean, you're in the ring there. You know what you got to do. You know what you can and cannot do. We have certain different policies that we've adhered to in the past that some we don't anymore. But like when something's in effect, I have to be there to be that the authority figure, just to ensure that everything's called fair. We've had to strip the title a couple of times. I had to strip a title from Pierre Carwillette. I've had to overturn some decisions. You saw the picture with Haku. He wasn't too happy. He was actually one of my favorite wrestlers when I was younger, and then to have him mad at you isn't very fun. But I mean, I know as the figurehead of the promotion, I have to stand my ground. I did get thrown out of a cage by Pierre Carwillette once. That was, I recovered. I played hockey. I know how to take a couple of bumps here and there. But you can't abuse an official. There's certain things that can take place in the ring that can't take place outside the ring. We had a no blood policy for a while. Now we do testing beforehand, because when we want, with our promotion, when we want serious wrestlers. We don't want like backyard people. There's a lot of people out there, like we can talk about this a little bit later, that they're in the business, but they somehow find a way to weasel their way onto cards through whatever means. They might promise to sell a few extra tickets. They might promise to we're going to bring in somebody else or whatever, and it's like, okay, here you go, you got an 8-minute match, and then they end up taking 25, and it just kills the mood. I mean, that stuff happens.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to that kind of dovetails nicely into your work with other wrestling companies, as well as on Vance Nevada, Canadian longstanding wrestler, his new book. Yeah.
So I haven't done much work with other companies. I mean, there are some people that have worked with Great North Wrestling who have actually gone on to do their own promotions. We wish them well. We don't really consider them competitors because they don't really leave the city, and whereas we have a sort of a larger territory that we adhere to. I've actually gone out to a few events just to sort of scout. I went to a lot of NCW Femme Fatale shows in Montreal back in the day. Not so much recently, because there haven't been that many shows. Let's see. I think there are 4 major promotions that are based in Ottawa right now, and we're the only one that actually goes outside the Ottawa limits. There used to be a couple of promotions in Cornwall, and neither of them made money at all. But now there's one. There's only one. Cornwall is only big enough for one. That's what we learned over the years. So good for them. So up and down the Ottawa Valley, there's been so many promotions that come and go, and I'll just segue into the Vance Nevada book here. Again, back in the day, there was just a few promotions operating in Canada, and they're pretty well known. They had some pretty big names behind them. They had finance behind them. They had TV deals, and then in the 80s and 90s, you see an explosion of indies, and there's a lot of them that just have come and gone, and you hear people talking about them, but there's nothing on the internet, there's nothing in libraries, that there's no records that they ever existed. All right, so what Vance Nevada did was he interviewed everybody that he could, like mostly I think it was through referrals, saying, oh yeah, this person there's this promotion that operated in this town and during these years, and then he would get a contact name. And so it's kind of like 25 years ago, there was a book out called Total Baseball. There's like every statistical record of every major and minor North American baseball league, and then Total Hockey came out in 1999. And so this is kind of like the total Canadian wrestling book. It has uh, biographies of every Canadian promotion that he could get a hold of, and also the histories of the title histories of each one that he could find. So, I mean, and what I did was I helped out by providing a lot of information for Great North Wrestling and Outaouais Professional Wrestling, which was actually a promotion run about 20 years ago by the Bruiser. Because the only thing that remains of that promotion, he says he has some pictures, and just some pictures. Some stuff was actually taken by the police as evidence in a there was some sort of insurance thing years ago that some jealous rival promoter brought against him, and somebody stole all his belts, and he believes they're somewhere in Gatineau right now. But when it comes down to that, like now we have this book here, and I have a copy there, Uncontrolled Chaos by Vance Nevada there. We have bios of Great North Wrestling, Hannibal, Outaouais Professional Wrestling. It's broken down by region. So you can look at, they have the Atlantic, they have Quebec, they have Ontario, Prairies, BC. And you can just see that one fellow told me, he says, you know what, now if I die tomorrow, there's a record that I did this. You know, I ran a promotion, I wrestled, I had these titles, I made all these people happy, I competed, I was in the business. It's going to be here forever. So which is so important, considering promotions and workers that weren't on TV, or if you look at Al Tomko's promotion in Vancouver, they were and Mid-South and some of the other territories, Memphis, where the weekly show was taped over. So that's a big important aspect that needs to be recorded for sure. Yeah. And another example is Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling. Rene Dupree's father, they used to send in the same videotape every week to the TV station, and they would just record over it. And there's no record of any of the great TV matches that they had, like in the 70s and 80s, when they were actually really popular. Like I know a few years ago, Rene put out a call to anybody who had recorded this on a VCR, but like how many people had VCRs in the late 70s, right? Like there's a few of them that exist on YouTube, but there's a lot of really good memories that are they're just gone. Like one of the things I remember the first time I actually got interested in professional wrestling, it was actually Atlantic Grand Prix. I was watching it at my grandmother and grandparents' place in New Brunswick, and I remember at the end of the show, they awarded somebody a trophy. I can't remember who it was, and then somebody else came out. Guy with like bleach blonde, wild hair, this scraggly beard. Maybe it was Randy Savage. Not saying it was, but it kind of looked like him at the time. He grabbed that trophy and he smashed it on the ground, and then he smashed it over that wrestler, and then they ended the show. And I'm like, okay, I got to see what's going to happen next week. But that's I've never been able to find that video on any tube streaming service.
Yeah, there's a lot of history that's lost when you look at the rise of the tape trader phenomenon. Was not to the 83 to the mid 80s it really started getting steam, and YouTube only has bits and pieces for sure. So anything that we can do to preserve the business in written form is vital, I believe. My last question would be surrounding the fact that there's been a lot of talk over the last year and a half about at least WWE cutting down on house shows and a gap in their presence that independent wrestling could theoretically fill. And in addition to that question, just wanted to know globally your thoughts on the state of independent wrestling in 2022 and what we could be looking at moving forward.
Yeah, well, I got a lot of thoughts on that actually. So again, I'm a big fan of developmental sports. Okay, so going back to working in minor league hockey, minor league baseball. I mean, I always used to like to go to games and say, okay, which of these guys here are going to make it the next level, right? Like that was always my thing. with wrestling. Okay, like the problem is there's not that the quality of the product is not there right now. They're cutting down on house shows because nobody's buying tickets. Okay, there's still some major events that are money makers, but they're not. You don't get excited about how many household names are there in the WWE right now. Right now, if John, the Undertaker is gone, John Cena, Brock Lesnar, there's
Reigns.
you don't really get excited about it. I mean, everybody's the same. Like the titles are changing constantly. Everybody's held the title at some point. It's not special anymore. It's just with indie wrestling. Okay, indie wrestling is the developmental part of pro wrestling. Unfortunately, I would like a return more to the territorial days where everything was controlled by the NWA, because while a lot of the indie wrestling is actually better than what you'd see on TV. Okay, there's just it's just how can I? It's hard to describe. There's just there's a lot of bad wrestling out there. Okay. But there's a lot of good wrestling. There's a lot of really good indies, but again, they suffer because there's some bad apples here and there. I think that there is, like, anybody now with a ring can call themselves a promoter. Okay. That's a problem. Anybody who can make a false promise to a promoter, a legit promoter, can get themselves on a wrestling card. Like, I remember years ago, we had a fellow who he came in as part of a battle royal. He had a little bit of an MMA background, but he did a battle royal and he got thrown out in 3 seconds. And then after that, he started calling himself a wrestler, and he actually got booked on some shows outside of our territory. But they could see he didn't know anything, but he was able to scam his way onto some events. And he was not trained at all. I mean, you have to get in there. You have to respect the business. And we've given some people chances over the years that just can't do that. Like, I think that there ought to be a guild. Okay, like you cannot be part of this business unless you're actually approved. Okay, by the guild. You have to be trained by somebody. You have to be certified by somebody.
Like state athletic commissions.
Low. Sorry?
Like state athletic commissions licensing again?
Well, something like that. Like, if there's they've been talking about a union, a professional wrestlers union, for the last 30 years or so. I think that would be something like that would be a start. But there's, the way the business was protected in the past, that should be it. Like, you can't get in unless a lot of the people that are at the top right now, they're getting pushes in the top feds. Okay, where'd they learn how? Those are like models and actors that went to some training program and got paid whatever, how many to go and train. They've never been on the road. They've never done the indie circuit. They don't know how to work a crowd. Okay, yeah, you can go in there, you can learn some moves, you can learn how to do some stunts, but you can't learn charisma. Like that can take years, and there's so very few of those people left in the business, again at the top, that have actually done that. I remember I think Honky Tonk Man told me, he said at the first WrestleMania, he said that the greenest person in there, the person with the least experience, had been in the business 7 years, and everybody else, I mean, they had been there like 15, 20 years, working the territories before they finally got those big paydays. And those guys and girls can go in there in the ring, and they don't even have to touch their opponent to get heat, right? They can just, they can just work the crowd. They can have everybody sitting on the edges of their seats, be entertaining, be memorable. They don't have to do all these, added stunts. Like a lot of the indie guys. Okay. It's like, okay, we give them 8 minutes and they take 20. Okay. Because it's their moment in the sun. They got to go out there. They got to add all these fancy dancy moves that, it don't really make any sense. It doesn't tell the story of the match at all. They're just trying to get them in there because they have a friend with a camera, because they want to put it on their social media saying, oh, look at this. Look at this Hurricanrana I did or whatever. And, the experienced fellows will say, the fewer the better. You don't add to a match. You take away. You plan it ahead of time, but then you take it away. Okay, with some exceptions, and they don't realize that. And you see 20 minutes of just acrobatics doesn't really make sense. The crowd will get pretty bored. I mean, I've seen crowds leave before the main event because of things like that.
Well, that brings up the AEW question. I couldn't agree with you more that less is usually more, but it seems that the indie spot fest, no emotional connection with the audience has been somewhat legitimized by the rise of AEW. And if you look at their product, it appears to be, overly heavy on stunts or high spots, whatever you want to call it. And that thread of storyline and emotion, with a few exceptions, of course, doesn't appear to be there. So I think if the independent scene could, not to say that there isn't a place for, acrobatics, whatever, but to go back to basics more, that would go a long way for becoming a different, or an alternative, a true alternative to the big two. But what are your thoughts on the AEW product?
Well, I'll be honest, I gave AEW a chance. I gave it a really long look before the pandemic, and I was impressed by some of them. Okay. But I was really questioning why they were pushing certain fellows over others. And there's just a lot of things that didn't seem to make sense. Like, okay, yeah, I get Cody Rhodes. He's the big name. He's the one that's gonna draw, because he wasn't getting the push in the WWE. Yeah, I get that. I've actually really impressed with Luchasaurus at the time. I know they turned him heel recently. I know. But a lot of these fellows, I mean, when I remember one of my phys ed teachers in high school would say, "Oh yeah, I was in university. We went to this wrestling show, and he says Hercules was late getting there, and he ran by us, and we thought he was one of the smallest guys out there on TV, but in real life, he's huge, right? Compared to them. And when you look at the AEW folks, like Sammy Guevara is not that imposing. Marco Stunt, not that imposing. Jungle Boy, not that there's so many guys that are under 200 pounds, and it's just not very believable in my opinion.
Well, that's one thing that a lot of commentators cite is the believability factor of the eye test. If you, back in the day, when a wrestler walked through the airport, as McMahon used to talk about, you would go, whoa, that you may not know who that person is, but they're actually someone. And I agree. A lot of the top talent on AEW doesn't stand out in that way. Circling back again to the WWE, you had spoken about performers that have that capacity to reach out to the audience and build an emotional connection, and then have solid athletic work as well. But it seems that even under the new leadership of Triple H, that we're looking at bringing in college athletes, semi-pro athletes, individuals who obviously have significant skill in that regard, but not necessarily the other pieces of the puzzle to make a complete performer. And I'm just wondering how do you see recruitment going in the next few years, and the importance of a strong, thriving indie scene, as you touched on before, to provide that developmental basis to have performers hone their craft and then be TV ready, which is something else that strikes me about even Raw, some of these individuals, they can't find the hard cam or have a hard time with their timing. And I'm not trying to be overly critical, but it just seems to me that the stronger the independents are, the more of a true feeder system, because NXT really isn't treated as a developmental. It's almost treated like a third brand.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, the indies, there's a lot of really good independent wrestlers who ought to be pushed at the highest level. I believe they've earned that right, but it's just there's politics behind it. I mean, okay, especially the last 20 years, they're only going to push their friends, okay, and it was, we could see that happen in WCW in the 90s. Like if you're friends with Hogan, if you're in that clique, of course you're gonna get pushed. There was a lot of people that just they didn't get that push because they weren't friends with the right people. There are people in the indie scene right now who, if they were on TV, they would make an impact. They would draw. People would tune in to see them. I can think of people that I've seen over the last 15 years. Hannibal being one of them. Didn't get the chance. Right now, Jeremy Prophet, extremely talented, got his head on straight. He would be an asset to any organization that would give him the opportunity. And Jessica Black as well. Another one who I know, Lufisto, for whatever reason, has not gotten that opportunity. She's just been, all she does is go out there and kill it every time. Like Speedball Mike Bailey, he had a great match with us in Kingston last year. But
tremendous, yes. Yeah,
I think if why are they really they're considered to be legends, but they're poor. Okay, like you're famous, you're respected, but you're poor. Okay, you deserve a payday. You should go on WrestleMania at some point. There's a lot of them. Like when we promote our earlier shows, okay, we would bring on like an older former WWE star, and like, okay, they would sell the tickets, right? But when people left, they would remember the Hannibal match. They'd remember Jeremy Prophet. They'd remember Sexy Eddie. They'd remember Max Testosterone. They'd remember the rise that Bruiser got from the crowd, from the opening match. That's worth a lot right there. And I just, they're banging their heads on the wall. But I mean, I think the female wrestlers are actually paid a bit more, and it's the same women in Ontario and Quebec that get booked every week. Okay, and I know what their rate is, and if they're getting booked 2 or 3 times a week, I think financially they're doing okay, more so than a lot of the male wrestlers who they get a bit less, or if at all, a lot of them they wrestle for free just to get the experience. So yeah, but I really don't think that the indies are used as a feeder system like they used to. It's too bad that a lot of the indies don't work together a bit more. Like they're very protective of their fiefdoms, I guess. And they if they could tap into a partnership and just stay true to their word and work together, okay, there's room for them all. And if you're successful, of course, you're going to get the attention of the bigger ones, and then they're going to pull your stars.
I couldn't agree more. Just we're quickly running out of time, but you touched on Jeremy Prophet, who will be the guest on this podcast next week. And you also mentioned that his match with Speedball Mike Bailey stole the show in Kingston last year, and I was ringside for that, so I couldn't agree more. I'm just curious as to your thoughts. He's making significant strides in his career. He's been at it for 17 years. Just wondering where you see Jeremy going in the future.
Well, I had a discussion with him because again, I've driven with him as well. And so when I first started out, I thought, okay, well, you had some dark matches, you've had some jobber matches on WWE, and like would they really take somebody? Would they use somebody as a jobber and then like 5-6 years later try to bring them in as a star? But now I realize, like, a lot of stars started out that way. Why he hasn't gotten that opportunity, I really don't know. I do know that he has been operating his own promotions in Montreal, like, and doing quite well. I know he wrestles every weekend. I mean, he was injured there about 2 or 3 years ago, and then he came back right before the pandemic. So I'm glad he came back in full force and healthy. But for the near future, I still see him, doing his thing, getting booked all over Canada and U.S. Big name in Montreal. Maybe he'll get a Japan trip, Puerto Rico, Mexico type thing. If I don't know who up in the Big Fed looks at him and says, no, this guy's not going to draw money. Well, there's everybody talks about him when the match is over, when the show's over. They always remember him. Okay,
100%.
And they'll come back the next year in the other town and see him as well. Yeah.
This hour has just flown by, and we're going to have to reschedule our second guest tonight. But I wanted to get as a final question your thought on the state of women's wrestling. As you know, Great North Wrestling has some fantastic female athletes, including our champ Nova, Jessica Black, to name but a few. And it appears that the women's revolution, quote unquote, in the WWE played itself out, so to speak, and they appear to be, at least in WWE, to be in a lesser than main event status after a brief run at the top. What are your thoughts in terms of independent wrestling featuring female competitors, women's wrestling, and do you think they should be an attraction on a card, or literally 2 to 3 matches on a card? Where do you see that fitting in?
Well, I see female wrestling was kind of below the radar for a really long time. The way I look at it is, like, back in the day, I'll use this example. Let's say a women's university sports team. Okay. They would get the worst practice times, compared to the men's teams. They wouldn't get the same financing. Okay. They were kind of like, pushed off to the side, brought in once in a while. But the thing you got to realize is, like, these are most of them are extremely dedicated athletes, and that's what you have to look at them as. Okay. They're capable. A lot of them, there's a big demand in them. Okay. Like, you forget about, okay, looks only, like, it only impresses you for like 2 or 3 seconds. Of course, you're going to notice what they look like, but then after that, okay, show me what you got. And at that point, that's when the cream rises to the top, as the Macho Man used to say. Okay. And the femme fatale shows I used to go to in Montreal, like, it was, it's different. It's a different type of wrestling, just like women's hockey is a different type of hockey than men's. And I'll qualify it this way, is like they have the same type of coaching, but there's more of an emphasis on team play. They pass a lot more. There's a lot less, individual type of play. So it's the same sport, but again, it just has a different flavor. Women's wrestling, okay, of course, there's a lot of them that aren't able to do, the big power moves, okay, that men can. But when you see, again, I'll use Lufisto again. When you see Lufisto jumping off the top rope, onto an opponent who's like, in the second row of the fans, I mean, she's giving it her all, right? And you got to respect that. I mean, as far as being on an equal footing, I think that that there's a lot of people that will pay just to see the women's product. All right, I think there's room for it on pretty much every card. Now, as far as the composition, it all depends on the type of talent that you have. Okay, Like, I mean, I mentioned prior to the interview, I mean, we did have a competitor for a while back, 8-9 years ago. Okay, she had the look, she had a good costume. When she got in the ring, she couldn't wrestle worth a crap. And okay, it's like, okay, we gave you your chance. Bye. Okay, nobody vetted her. I mean, she just got referred by somebody else, and we saw her in the ring, and it's like, well, or somebody. What happens is somebody no shows, and we got to use a filler. Sometimes the fillers do pretty well, but I think that they have to be taken seriously. We've actually had a few in our promotion who have actually gone on to bigger things. Let's Cherry Bomb, now known as the Bunny. I mean, she was on a lot of our earlier shows, so it's good to see, some of our people like move up eventually. I think that what the WWE has realized is that they can't just throw out a bunch of underwear models, because the smart fans will see through them, aka Sable back in the day. So I think that the women probably have a better chance in the indies of making it up to a big Fed than the men do.
Well, we're really looking forward to having Nova on the podcast October 16th and delving into her background. But we have come to the end of our hour. It is once again just flown by. Very, very fascinating discussion. Where can we find you on social media, Michael?
Just Great North Wrestling website, Hannibal TV. If you have any inquiries, you can just send it to the organizational inbox there.
Excellent. Well, we do appreciate your time, and I foresee as we're restarting in 2023, we'll have an opportunity to have you on again, and appreciate your time again. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, sir. I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Follow us on